Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Razi bin Roslan and we are from Group 5 from Geology Lab. We're going to perform a video presentation regarding thin section and petrography. And I will be in charge in explaining introduction and objective. Next slide. Okay. First, we must know what this experiment about. So the thin section and petrography are important for determining the rock lithologies in the oil and gas industry. He also said that rock identification is crucial in order to ensure optimal and efficient extraction of hydrocarbons such as gas and oil. Other than that, the combination for both thin section and petrography is very important for rock identification. So how thin section and petrography is performed? First, the sample will be cut into smaller pieces which can measure up to 30 micrometers. Um, Please note in mind that this method, the methods I said before, thin section and petrography is needed before you further or proceed into the next phase of exploration such as drilling and extraction. The modern science managed to create the efficient way to determine mineralogical composition and structure through the combination of both methods. Uh, I will explain on what is petrography. Petrography mainly focus on analysis that involve light transmitters under polarizing scope, while thin section are used in determining the rock origin and evolution of the parent rock. The thin section will always include the placement of sample under polarized transmitted light. The thin section is responsible to highlight composition. Next slide. Okay. On my next explanation, I will explain the objective and I will include a little tiny bit of details about thin section and petrography. First of all, in oil and gas industry, there are three major rock types in oil, which are igneous rock, sedimentary rock, and metamorphic rock. All the said rock have different lithologies. Therefore, the identification is important. Uh, as all the type of rock represent or have different lithologies, that means the method of extraction will be different. So that's why thin section and petrography is important. The next, as I said before, thin section is involving the placement of variety of sample, and in this case, sample from the experiment. And while petrography is defined as analysis that use polarizing scope and luminescence microscope.
Hi, my name is Shazatu Shwada. So I am going to explain about the theory part of this experiment. So theoretically, thin section petrography is a fragment of rock or other minerals that is cut from the sample, which mechanically ground smooth to a thickness of 30 micron and observed with a transmitter polarized light microscope. An interference color chart such as Michael-Levy interference color chart can be used as a tool to identify the presentation of certain features such as the presence of bedding or layering in sedimentary rocks and the presence of mineral foliation or lineation in the metamorphic rock. Then the rock composition is found by determining which mineral that make up the rock. The minerals which comprise the rock can be identified using this field testing method, whereby the texture of coarse grain itself can distinguish the individual minerals. The properties that can be examined include the behavior of refracted, and transmitted light through the thin section. In addition, different minerals will have different characteristics of optical properties, which then can be referred to the tables of optical mineral properties to identify the types of mineral. For example, in the table given, if you can see, the minerals such as dolomite will show colors such as pink to white to gray or to tan. The optical properties of dolomite that can be seen through the microscope is transparent to translucent. Okay, next, the apparatus that we use in this experiment are geological cutter, thin sectioning machine, transmitted polarized light microscope, hot plate, microscope slide, and also thermoplastic cement. So for the procedure, firstly is rock cutting. So the rock sample was cut by using the geo cutter. Then the rock was polished by using the sandpaper. And then the second one is preparation of the microscope slide. So basically the rock sample was applied above the microscope slide, whereby the microscope slide has been heated and thermoplastic cement was applied onto it. So this is to make sure that the rock sample is stick to the microscope slide. Next is the cleaning section. So the slide was placed on the specimen holder of the grinding machine, and then the rock was slowly thinned to 30 micron meter and then polished by using sandpaper. And lastly, for the microscope viewing, the slide was placed at the slide compartment of the microscope. Then the picture of the rock can be viewed and captured. The lens of the microscope were adjusted to 10 times zoom or 20 times zoom, is dependent, to get a better picture and clearer picture. And then this picture then can be referred to the color chart to identify the types of mineral that present in the rock sample.
Okay, for sample 1, under the polarizing microscope, the result produced is in greenish and grayish color. So, what we can observe is that the type of rock could be olivine mineral composition. It is considered as ferromagnesium minerals. With this specification and observation, the rock normally have range of melting temperature around and up to 1200 degrees Celsius. The chemical composition usually have in this rock is 40% silicon dioxide, while calcium oxide is not exist. Sample 1 contains the most iron 3 oxide and magnesium oxide compared to the other textures such as rhyolite, andesite, and basalt. Interestingly, sample 1 does not contain any potassium oxide and sodium oxide, while rhyolite have the most of it. This sample is determined based on the table given, where under the microscope, which state that the mineralogical composition as percent by volume, it is at the greenish color at the high temperature, olivine. So, that's for the sample 1. And sample 2, next slide. Sample 2, if you can see at the image, the blue circle is determined as calcite, while the red circle is considered as basalt. So, for sample 2, we can Observe that basalt is a black fine-grained igneous rock consisting mostly of minerals from plagioclase and pyroxene. As just as an extrusive rock, such as a lava flow, it more often shapes but may also develop in small disruptive bodies, including an igneous dike or a thin seal. It has a gabbro-like composition. The distinction among basalt and gabbro would be that basalt is a rock of fine grain, while gabbro is a rock of coarse grain. Calcite is usually white but also colorless, can be grey, red, green, blue, yellow, brown, orange, but in this sample it is white. Limestone is a sedimentary rock while it's mainly composed of calcite. During diagenesis, it develops by both the chemical deposition of calcium carbonate and the conversion of shell, coral, fecal, and algal sediment to calcite. These rocks are very abundant and make up a large part of the surface of the Earth. They act as one of our planet's biggest carbon reservoir. The characteristic of basalt and calcite or sample 2 are more obvious at 10 times zoom compared to 4 times, since the amount of mineral, color intensity and angularity of the grain can be differentiated.
Concluded that this experiment is a success since our objectives for this experiment has been fulfilled. We were tasked to identify the types of rocks and to make the samples into thin sections, and were petrography to identify and analysis the type of rock. And we successfully analyzed that the first sample and the second sample has been categorized as igneous rock. So for the first sample, the rock is igneous rock with a peridotite type. This is due to the greenish characteristic, and as Muhammad Aiman has discussed in the discussion, this is due to the high temperature and the greenish characteristics. For the second sample, the igneous rock is identified as basalt type and the calcite type. So there are many types of rocks in aggregation, but the most noticeable rocks are basalt type and calcite type rock. So this is because the basalt has a dark black fine mineral composition, while calcite have a white colorless gray shades. So because of these noticeable characteristics of the rock, so basalt and calcite was identified in this experiment for sample 2. Now I'm going to explain the recommendations for this lab. So for the recommendation, first is that we need to prepare a standardized sample references, which were given for different types of formation. So this standardized sample reference will reduce the analytical error by the students in the process of identification of the rock types. Next, we need to ensure that the thickness of the rocks were according to the specifications provided for a much detailed observation under the microscope. Next, we need to compare the results to many different sources, since rock characteristics requires in-depth analysis to make assumptions. Last but not least, it is to ensure that the slabs of rocks, after grinded, were rinsed and wiped dry before placing under the microscope to avoid miscellaneous debris and water droplets covering the sample. These are the references that the group has referred to. That is all from us. Thank you.